There was a woman named Miriam who lived in a city where modern life moved fast, and people often forgot to slow down and reflect on their choices. She was 32 years old, worked as a nurse at a busy hospital, and had a heart full of compassion for those who were suffering. Every day she saw pain, illness, and struggle, and these experiences had taught her to value health, faith, and the precious gift of time that God grants to each person. Miriam had been married once before, years ago, when she was much younger and less wise. It had been a difficult marriage that ended in divorce after 3 painful years. Her ex-husband had been a man who looked good on paper, educated, from a good family, financially stable, but his character had revealed itself slowly over time. He had been controlling, dismissive of her feelings, and gradually his treatment had become emotionally harmful. When Miriam finally found the courage to seek divorce, her family had supported her, understanding that staying in a destructive marriage was worse than the stigma of separation. After the divorce, Miriam spent 5 years alone, healing from the wounds that couldn't be seen but ran deep in her soul. She threw herself into her work, her prayers, and rebuilding her relationship with God. She read the Quran daily, attended Islamic lectures, and slowly learned to forgive both her ex-husband and herself for the mistakes they had both made. She came to understand that her failed marriage wasn't a reflection of her worth as a person, but rather a chapter of learning that God had written into her life story for reasons she might not fully understand until much later. During this time of healing, Miriam made a profound discovery. She realized that her most serious relationship, the one that truly mattered, had not been with her ex-husband at all. It had been with her own pain, her own insecurities, her own fear of being alone. She had been in a relationship with a voice in her head that told her she wasn't good enough, that she had failed, that no one would ever want her again because she was divorced. This relationship with self-doubt and shame had been more consuming than her actual marriage had ever been. One night, after completing her night shift at the hospital, Miriam sat in her car in the parking lot, too exhausted to drive home immediately. She looked up at the stars, visible despite the city lights, and began to pray, not with formal words, but with the raw honesty of a broken heart seeking healing. "God," she whispered, "I have been carrying this weight for so long. I have been in a relationship with my past, letting it define me, letting it tell me who I am and what I deserve. I am tired of this burden. Please help me let go. Help me understand that my worth comes from you, not from whether a marriage succeeded or failed. Help me be free." As tears streamed down her face, Miriam felt something shift inside her chest, as if a tight knot was slowly beginning to loosen. It wasn't a sudden miracle or a flash of light, but a gentle whisper in her soul reminding her of a verse from the Quran she had memorized as a child. "Indeed, with hardship comes ease." The verse didn't say after hardship comes ease, but with it, meaning that even in the midst of difficulty, God's mercy and relief are present if we have eyes to see them. Around the same time, a man named Hamza moved to the city to start a new position as an engineer at a construction company. Hamza was 35 years old, had never been married, and carried his own story of struggle and growth. In his 20s, he had been engaged to a woman he thought he would spend his life with, but 6 months before the wedding, she had called it off, explaining that she had realized they weren't compatible and didn't want to marry him out of obligation. The broken engagement had devastated Hamza. He had spent the next several years bitter and closed off, convinced that he was unlovable, that something was fundamentally wrong with him. He had dated casually after that, trying to fill the emptiness, but nothing felt right. He had been in a serious relationship, not with another person, but with the idea that he needed someone else to complete him, to prove his worth, to validate his existence. It wasn't until Hamza reached his early 30s that he began to understand a profound truth. He had been looking for love in all the wrong places because he hadn't first established a proper relationship with his Creator. He had been seeking fulfillment from human beings who were themselves imperfect and searching, when the only source of true peace and completeness was God Himself. Hamza began to pray regularly again, something he had neglected during his years of bitterness. He started reading Islamic books about purpose and contentment, listening to lectures about how the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had taught that true strength comes from inner peace and reliance on God, not from external validation. Slowly, Hamza transformed from a man desperate for someone to love him into a man content with God's plan for his life, understanding that if marriage was meant for him, it would come at the right time with the right person. Miriam and Hamza met through a mutual friend who thought they might be compatible. The friend arranged for them to meet at a cafe, with the friend present as a chaperone, in accordance with Islamic guidelines about interactions between unmarried men and women. Neither Miriam nor Hamza was particularly excited about this meeting. Both had learned to be cautious about their hearts and realistic about their expectations. But as they sat together over tea and conversation, something unexpected happened. They found themselves talking not about surface things like jobs and hobbies, but about real matters of the heart. Hamza, with surprising honesty, spoke about his broken engagement and how it had led him on a journey toward understanding his purpose. "I thought I needed that relationship to be happy," he explained, "but when it ended, I realized I had been in a much more serious relationship all along, a relationship with my own ego, my own need to prove something to the world. Breaking free from that has been harder than any breakup, but also more rewarding." Miriam listened with growing interest. When it was her turn to speak, she found herself sharing things she rarely discussed with anyone. "I was married before," she said, watching carefully for his reaction. Some men would judge her for this, seeing divorce as a mark of failure. But Hamza simply nodded with understanding, encouraging her to continue. "After the divorce, I thought I was healing by staying busy and avoiding relationships. But I realized now that I was actually in a very serious relationship with my shame and my past. I let it define me, control my choices, tell me what I deserved. Only recently have I started to break free from that and understand that God's mercy is bigger than any mistake or any hardship I've faced." Hamza's eyes reflected deep understanding. "I think many people struggle with this. We're taught to avoid bad relationships with others, but no one warns us about the toxic relationships we can have with our own thoughts, our own past, our own fears." They talked for 2 hours, and by the end, both felt something they hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the naive hope of youth that thinks love conquers all, but the mature hope of people who have been tested and emerged stronger in their faith. Over the following months, Miriam and Hamza continued to meet in appropriate settings, always with family members or friends present, getting to know each other in a way that honored Islamic principles. They discovered that their past struggles, rather than being obstacles, had actually prepared them for a healthy relationship. They both understood the importance of communication, of not taking each other for granted, of building their marriage on a foundation of shared faith rather than just emotional attraction. When Hamza formally proposed marriage to Miriam, he did so with words that showed his wisdom. "Miriam, I am not asking you to complete me, because only God can do that. I am not asking you to fix my past or heal my wounds, because that is work I have done with God's help. What I am asking is whether you would like to walk together on this path of life, supporting each other in faith, growing together toward God, building something beautiful not because we need it to feel whole, but because we are already whole and want to share that wholeness with each other. Miriam said yes, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. She understood exactly what he meant because she felt the same way. Their wedding was simple but filled with genuine joy. During the ceremony, as they signed the marriage contract, Miriam thought about how far she had come from that broken woman sitting in her car, crying and carrying the weight of shame. She had been in a serious relationship with her past, and breaking free from it had been one of the hardest things she had ever done. But it had been necessary to reach this moment. In the early months of their marriage, Miriam and Hamza made it a practice to pray together every night before bed, thanking God for bringing them together and asking for his continued guidance. One evening, as they sat together after prayer, Hamza took Miriam's hand. "Can I tell you something I've been thinking about?" he asked. "Of course. Before I met you, I was in a serious relationship with the idea that I wasn't good enough because someone had rejected me. That relationship consumed years of my life, shaped my decisions, affected my self-worth. But God used that struggle to teach me something crucial, that my value doesn't come from being chosen by a person, but from being created by God with purpose and intention. If I hadn't learned that lesson first, I don't think I would have been ready for you, for us, for this marriage." Miriam squeezed his hand. "I understand completely. I was in a serious relationship with my guilt and shame about my divorce. I let it tell me that I was damaged, that I was less than other women who hadn't been married before. Breaking free from that voice, learning to see myself the way God sees me, as someone worthy of love and capable of growth, that was the real preparation for this marriage." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Hamza spoke again. "I think this is something many people struggle with but rarely talk about. We all have these serious relationships with our past, our fears, our insecurities. And sometimes those relationships are more powerful and destructive than any relationship with another person could ever be." Miriam nodded thoughtfully. "And the only way to break free is to develop an even more serious relationship with God, with prayer, with the understanding that we are more than our mistakes and our struggles." As their marriage grew stronger with each passing month, both Miriam and Hamza became aware of how their past struggles had actually been blessings in disguise. The pain had forced them to turn to God, to seek healing in the right place, to understand themselves deeply before trying to join their lives with another person. One day, Miriam's younger cousin, a woman of 25 who was going through a painful breakup, came to her for advice. The cousin was devastated, convinced she would never find love again, that she had wasted years on the wrong person. Miriam sat with her, holding her hand, and shared her own story with complete honesty. "I need you to understand something," Miriam said gently. "Right now, you're in pain over the relationship that ended. But be careful not to enter into an even more serious relationship, a relationship with that pain, with the belief that this breakup defines you, with the idea that you're not worthy of love. That relationship, if you let it take root, will be far more damaging than any relationship with a person could ever be." Her cousin looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean that after my divorce, I spent 5 years in a serious relationship with my shame. I let it control my choices, my self-image, my hope for the future. Breaking free from that was harder than ending my actual marriage. Don't make the same mistake I did. Feel your pain, process your grief, but don't let it become your identity. Don't let this breakup be the beginning of a toxic relationship with yourself. The cousin began to cry, and Miriam continued with the wisdom she had earned through her own struggles. Instead, develop a serious relationship with God. Pour your heart out in prayer the way you poured your heart into that relationship. Seek comfort in His words the way you sought comfort in that person's presence. Let God heal you and teach you and prepare you for whatever comes next. That is the relationship that will never betray you, never leave you, never fail you. These words, born from Miriam's own experience, planted seeds of hope in her cousin's heart. Over time, the young woman followed this advice, and Miriam watched her transform from someone broken by loss to someone strengthened by faith. Years passed, and Miriam and Hamza were blessed with children. As their kids grew, they made sure to teach them not just about avoiding bad relationships with others, but about recognizing and ending toxic relationships with fear, with pride, with materialism, with any voice that contradicted what God said about their worth and purpose. Your most serious relationship, Hamza would tell his children, should always be with your Creator. Every other relationship, with your spouse, your parents, your friends, even with yourself, should flow from that primary relationship. When you put God first, everything else falls into the proper place. Miriam would add, and remember, my dear children, that we all carry struggles and past hurts. The question isn't whether you'll face difficulties, but whether you'll let those difficulties become toxic relationships that control your life, or whether you'll use them as stepping stones toward a deeper relationship with God. Their home became known in the community as a place of wisdom and healing. Other couples going through struggles would seek their counsel, and both Miriam and Hamza would share their stories honestly, never pretending their lives had been perfect, but always pointing back to the one who had healed them and guided them. The truth that Miriam and Hamza had discovered, that our most serious relationships are often not with other people but with our own thoughts, fears, and past experiences, became a message that helped many others find freedom. They taught that you cannot build a healthy relationship with another person until you've ended the toxic relationships you have with shame, bitterness, pride, and fear. This is the wisdom that God grants to those who turn to Him in their pain, who seek healing in the right place, who understand that every struggle is an opportunity to grow closer to the one who created us. And this is the foundation upon which true love can be built. Not love as a desperate need to fill an emptiness, but love as a joyful sharing between two people who are already complete in their faith, walking together toward their Creator. The story of Miriam and Hamza reminds us that before we seek a partner for life, we must first examine the serious relationships we already have with our past, our insecurities, our pain, and with God's help, transform those relationships from sources of destruction into sources of strength.